I followed up with a managing director from Moelis more than 10 times before he ever replied. And those follow-ups, and especially that last one, got me a chat, which I ultimately converted into my investment banking offer. Hey guys, I'm Matthew and I run FR Consulting. And after landing my elite boutique investment banking offer from a Canadian non-target, I've helped hundreds of non-target students break into investment banking too. This video was filmed during a live workshop that I ran for students recruiting for investment banking during the summer 2025 and 2026 cycles. And in it, I basically cover my entire approach to recruitment, how I was able to beat out students from Harvard, Cornell, and Princeton to land my IB offer. That cycle, Moelis took about 4,000 applications and hired about 50 interns. That's a 1% acceptance rate. And this video shows you how to beat 99% of your peers. It starts first with, well, when to start preparing for junior penultimate summer investment banking recruitment. 2, when to network and with who. 3, the ideal schedule for behavioral and technical prep. 4, how your resume should look, the number and quality of your experiences. 4, and 5, what not to do to land your offer. Enjoy. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your day, especially near exam season. So I do appreciate it. And today we're going to be going over, approaching summer 25, summer 26, when it comes to investment banking, private equity, and how to break into them and how to prepare and what's still out there when it comes to these two cycles and what should you be doing in the meantime to really make sure that you're optimally positioned to get the offers that you want. Now, just a little bit of an intro, we'll follow this, and then we'll kind of go into what's been going on with summer 25, where we are now. We'll talk about sort of the philosophy behind recruiting and just the mindset that you should approach recruiting with. And then we'll get into the specifics of how to prepare for both cycles, which firms to look at, how to reach out to them. And we'll have a short little bit on summer 24 at the end. Really not going to be that long, and then we'll flip over to a Q&A. So I'll probably be talking for about 40 to 45 minutes. But during the open Q&A segment, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to throw them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them all. So as I said, thank you guys for coming. And by the end of this presentation, you're going to learn, all these things. And I think the most important thing would just be, I know probably a lot of you are feeling a little bit stressed out currently, given where we are with summer 25. You may or may not have gotten an offer. You may or may not have expected to get an offer or have been preparing for it for a long time. And maybe it just hasn't lived up to your expectations, but that's okay. There's still a lot out there, so don't worry too much. But I know that there's a couple of you out there who I've talked to before. I see, a couple familiar names, but for those who don't, my name is Matthew. I grew up in Singapore, came to Vancouver for university, went to UBC. Right before this, was in the military, and so I think that was sort of why coming into university, I was very focused on careers, and managed to, I think, achieve what I set out to do. In doing so, and what I think was often overlooked is just the amount of sort of rejection and failures, and what many of you are probably suffering from right now. I've been through it, and it's completely normal. But I think the important thing is to know that as you go through those stages, you do get better. And I think that was why I was finally able to help other students break in on an informal basis, and ultimately then decided to start my own sort of business, helping students in a formal manner. And this is just sort of some of the placements that we've gotten so far for 2025. It's funny because there are 3 UBS positions given out, and we got 2. But yeah, there's nothing going on there. But because I am very grateful for you guys coming, for those who stay till the end, these are all the things that you're going to get. I won't list all of them, but I'm sure some of them will be very helpful for you, especially in terms of like the email formats and contact details and all that stuff. But you guys know where to find me on LinkedIn. So if there are particular things that you think you need help with when it comes to templates, when it comes to videos or stuff like that, feel free to always drop me a message, and I'll do my best to address it. The other thing is that, if you guys do want to join the program, there will be a special offer for those at the end. So yeah, we'll get into it now. I'll stop selling myself. So summer 25 so far. So how's it been? Well, we saw the US kind of kick off towards January and into March. And that's pretty classic as it pertains to US recruiting and just how much faster it is versus Canada. Typically it starts off with, I think it was Morgan Stanley kind of had a couple diversity offers out in January, and the EVs quickly picked up and followed suit. I think I had one of my students was Apex partner probably second week of January, with Blackstone a couple of weeks later. So this is very, very typical of sort of the cycles. What was atypical though was, in line with last year, but still atypical on like a 5-year basis, was the Big Five and their satellite offices. And some of you may have been surprised as well, but yeah, like Vancouver, Calgary, they were going early March, if not late February. And this caught some people by surprise, but certainly the global banks, they often follow their US counterparts in terms of timelines, just maybe a couple of weeks behind. The only caveat to this is that RBC, they're actually happening this week. So excuse me if I confuse anyone there, but RBC, Van, and Calgary are going on right now. And then we also saw, like Fort Capital, Burgundy, OMERS drop 2025 postings and then quickly take them back. So I don't know the people who have landed there, but that's certainly atypical of those firms who typically don't recruit that early. But some of the key things, though, that happened throughout 2025 that I noticed was similar to cycles in the past. Technicals are getting more and more difficult, significantly so. In fact, we're now at the point where paper LBOs and that sort of whole LBO chapter, maybe the chapter that you've been dreading or haven't been looking at, it really is now being tested at the Big Five. And that difference between why the Big Five tested and why US banks did it or did and why the Big Five didn't was because just in Canada there's a lot less sponsor activity, financial sponsor activity, and so there just isn't a need to evaluate a candidate's knowledge in that area. But right, as with every year, the bar gets raised, and so they need to find new ways to test people. I mean, and we'll dive into this later, but that's why networking came to be, and why it is what it is today. And like cycles in the past, the main reason why students don't pass the first round is because of technical knowledge. And first rounds generally tend to be very, very heavy on the technical side, to weed out those candidates, to separate the proverbial men from the boys. But at the end of the day, the satellite offices for both the Big Five and US banks, global banks as well, if you're looking at a satellite office, they will not take you if it seems to them like you're interested in lateraling to the HQ or transferring over after your internship. So just sort of a word of caution to those who maybe are going into future recruitment cycles. If you are looking at, let's say, Evercore Toronto, like don't tell them you've been networking with the New York team. Like it will hurt your odds. I made that mistake a couple of times, so I speak from experience. But just to put sort of context or to give sort of light to sort of the increasing difficulty of technicals over time, you see Scotia's 2021 technicals were pretty textbook, right? Nothing too difficult, nothing arithmetical. 2024 gets a bit harder, still asking questions about the valuation methodologies, but now multi-step accounting questions as well as some on the valuation side too. And then National Bank, who, I mean, Big Six, Big Five, there's a reason for that, but even then, this summer, still asking pretty difficult questions, certainly more difficult than Scotia did in summer 24. So if you guys have been ignoring these chapters in the guides, the ones you see above, maybe next year they'll be the ones that they're asking everyone. I mean, IFRS versus GAAP historically never tested. This year, I think it was Jefferies Toronto that asked a couple questions about that, DTAs and DCLs as well. So yeah, stuff is always getting more difficult, and I guess that's why you sort of got to stay ahead of the game and use, and we'll get into this later, use your peers as the reference point for what you need to do more of. So the other things was that, yeah, like networking still is an essential piece of all of this. I don't know anyone who got a first round interview, not a higher view, okay, in person or face-to-face first round interview without networking. Unless you have a sick resume, which would have only come to fruition had you gotten sick internships through networking before, right? You're going to have to network to get these interviews. And as I was saying, though timelines have historically always moved up over time, this year they're actually quite consistent with last year's cycle. And yeah, as I mentioned before, there were that handful of firms that kind of went abnormally early, but I'm not sure if that's going to be a continuing trend. So looking ahead then, right, what you guys are kind of all waiting for, what's still to come? So we got the Toronto offices of the Big Five. And national bank, big six, they typically go a lot later than the rest of the big five. In fact, they're doing fall 2024 processes before summer 2025 ones. So I think that serves as an indicator that, okay, well, national bank, have you not networked for them? You should try to for summer processes. And you can be confident they're going to be happening after your exam, so into May. In fact, I think they'll be dropping applications at the beginning of May. So still a fair amount of time when it comes to that. But I will say that people have been networking with the Toronto offices for the Big Six since January. And so it's more likely than not that they've already settled on that short list of candidates who they are taking for the interviews. In fact, I think RBC Toronto dropped interviews today. So stuff is picking up. Now, Turtle Creek, Burgundy, Novacap. So Burgundy, as I said, kind of already did their thing. I'm not sure if they have more offers left, but Turtle Creek and Novacap, they typically are recruiting sort of within the mid-May to early June. And they are truly some of the more early ones when it comes to second year summer internships or what's left for summer 25. And you'll see now that there is actually a significant amount left when it comes to that cycle. Sorry, I'm just going to admit a couple other people. Yeah, there's still a lot left when it comes to 25, but it's fast approaching. And if you're not already networking for it, if you're not already settled on a list of firms that you're trying to target, you need to very soon. So, by the way, all the email formats for these firms listed on the screen. For those who stay to the end, it is, yeah, well, like that'll be on an Excel file, and you'll have all of that stuff. But it's like, okay, well, how did you identify these things, Matthew? Well, one, there are three main ways, but the first one would be just look at students' LinkedIn profiles. You guys have probably heard of it. I've probably told some of you that. Certainly is the best way or the highest confidence way to identify an internship that you could potentially work at. Because as a second year or as a first year going into second year, right, what the typical constraint that you face is that they're looking for people who are going to graduate, right? Because they want a full timer. So it's like there are limited set of firms that would take an intern purely for an internship with paying no regard to whether or not they would want to come back full time. So there's very few firms that do that. And so, I mean, if someone wanted to go to Moelis, for example, right, looking at, okay, well, he went to this investment bank. I want to go there too. Okay, what did he do before that? That's going to be your best, not most efficient, but certainly most effective way of finding what you could potentially intern at during next summer. Now, the other thing would be proprietary internship tracker, whether that's like with a club, maybe I've sent you mine before, maybe that's within an organization or within the broader school, but if you have that historical database, it certainly would be instructive to look at it and find, okay, what internships are out or what postings are out along historical date ranges. And so here, this one I put together since on the 5th of September of last year. You can see that OTPP, PSP, CPP, they have postings, and they dropped those postings at the middle of August. That's pretty late. If you remember the sort of timeline that we were looking at before. And in fact, many of those positions, they're front office. So you don't be worried about there being a lack of opportunities. Be worried about getting ready for them and getting good enough to secure them, because there is stuff out there. It's just that you got to put in the effort to find it. Now, the last, I think, source to get these internships would be your career or university career portal. The Saunders one, the one at UBC, that is, they have a function where you can, look for a historical date range. It's a bit clunky, but mess around with your university career portal and see if that's a viable option for you. Because if it is, it's probably more efficient than LinkedIn. I mean, if they're coming to your school, then you know that, okay, there is some sort of preferential treatment, at least an inclination to take people from your school. But I think a combination of the three would probably work best. Now, after you've identified these opportunities, and really what we're doing here is finding the universe of firms and internships that you could potentially secure an offer from. Now, why is that important? Why is it important to do up front? Why can't I just, willy-nilly just go look at LinkedIn postings, do that all the time? Well, one, if on LinkedIn itself, if you were to do that, you only have what 2 weeks to a month before now you're one of like 100 students flooding in with applications, networking with all the people on that team. And so it's like you don't stand out. And it's not only that you don't stand out, but you don't look thoughtful. It doesn't look intentional. And it's very clear from the employer's point of view that it's like, okay, you're just one of 200 students just applying to this because they saw a brand name and capital markets buzzword. So first, find the firms that have taken second years before at your school, even better. And don't limit yourself to ones that would be a month out, 2 months out. Look 5 months out, because that gives you so much more of an opportunity to network, to nurture your connections, and effectively build a relationship with the people on that team or in that firm. Really, it's also just about stress minimization. If you know that these 100 opportunities are out there, these are the only ones that will come out over the next 8 months, and it's just a matter of time before they do, that feels good. I'm sure many of you felt that sort of stress this term when you kind of felt like you were behind the curve, always playing defense. Like you see a posting pop up, you apply to it, and another one pops up. It's like, if you do this exercise first, if you were to spend 6 to 8 hours this weekend just looking at these things, you're gonna feel so much better going into the summer because you already have a list of all the things. You don't need to like instinctively check LinkedIn periodically, because I've been there. It's not fun. Now, once you've found the firms and the internships, you want to find the employees, as many as you can. Again, the same sort of thesis as the one before. Do all the work up front so you don't need to deal with the administrative burden of compiling internships and seeing who works here and there. Just do it all now. And I'll get into this later, but this is something that I think a lot of students like miss is you should try to start all the way from the bottom. They're going to give you insights that you otherwise wouldn't get. And like a past intern could be like, hey, this analyst likes this, so you should talk to him like this, and say you like this football club. And if you're going to talk to this VP, right, say that. At the end of the day, all comes down to rapport building. And if you can get any sort of information advantage as it pertains to building rapport with that particular person, you'll be golden. And then, yeah, you start networking. Now, you probably heard this before, but let's put pen to paper on this. So looking at the next couple months into the new year, so what should we be doing? From every firm that you've identified today or this weekend or whatever it is, reach out to at least one person before the end of April. Now you're probably thinking, I have exams. That's exactly why you should. Because every other student in here is thinking that they have exams, and that's why they won't be networking this month. Point about standing out, that's how you do it. Now, the other thing that I think a lot of students miss, and we will dive into this later when it comes down to really just dissecting preparation for these cycles. You guys have probably heard someone laud the merits of mock interviews. I certainly push mock interviews on people, right? What is never really talked about is mock coffee chats. But it's kind of like the same thing, no? Because if you were to think of the interview as the gate between you and the offer, then what stands between you and that interview is the coffee chat. So it's the interview before the interview. So why don't you mock interview for that? That's something that I think a lot of students miss out on, and is why perhaps they're not getting the referrals at the frequency that they thought they would. It's just because you're not good enough at coffee chatting yet. But that's no shot at you. It's just because you haven't done enough of them. So do more. Try to match the volume of mock interviews that you do with coffee chats and see what happens. And okay, you're like, well, the difference, Matthew, would be that you're talking to a professional, and there could be consequences if I mess this up, right? It's like, yes. So talk to professionals for which there would be no consequence if you did mess it up. Which professionals are those? The ones in positions that you don't care about. So if we're all looking at investment banking today, right? Then, dude, go talk to a Big Four accountant. It's like, even if that chat goes terribly, it's like, you think word is getting back to any of the big six banks? Like, no, right? And if anything, I think you get a higher response rate to the Big Four because probably less people are reaching out to them. So you can do more coffee chats, right, of lower consequence, but still emulate the training ground, the sort of the learning effects that you would get in a real coffee chat. Now, I think it's important to only look at summer 25 in the context of what it could lead to in the future. Now, I know maybe some of you, summer 25 is the penultimate cycle, and we'll get into that in terms of the strategies to deal with that shortly. But for those of you, which I think is the majority of us, for whom summer 25 is a stepping stone to summer 26, or just to position you well for it, that is one, the right mindset. But two, right, think about sort of, if you want to go to the US and you're a Canadian student, it's like, well, you really got to stand out. So you should be networking as early as possible. So August, September, October, those are ideal times. Now, I would say if you're a Canadian student and you've landed your summer 25 offer and you're looking only at Canada, it's like, dude, network then as well. And it's like, okay, well, why do I network with them? I'm asking them about job opportunities like 6 months out. Wouldn't that look weird? It's like, yes, if on the email you're asking about job opportunities. One of the benefits that you would get from starting this early, this far in advance of an actual interview process, would be that you can kind of come to them as non-needy, non-desperate, right? As someone purely looking to build a relationship. Because the vast majority of approaches that they experience from students will probably be explicit asks for a referral, or no one really does that, but an explicit ask for talking about potential internship opportunities. I mean, I was there once, right? So that's why starting early is important, or one of the reasons why it's important. And I think if you were to flip the script and be like, well, I'm going to coffee chat people 8 months in advance of any sort of interview process, and then try and actually build and nurture that relationship, which we'll get into in a second, trust me, the odds that you get a referral are going to be incredibly high. Now, this is when the summer 26 cycle would be. So just keep that in mind as you go through summer 25. It's like, well, the earlier I can on summer 25, the earlier I can switch over, the bigger, wider network I can form, but also deeper. Remember, we're talking about relationship building. So getting summer 25 done as early as possible is hugely, hugely beneficial and something that you should 100% focus on. Now, regardless of whether you're looking at the US or Canada, if you're looking at either and you want to ensure that you will get an offer, then you should be at this stage by January of 2025. Granted, I know the summer 25, like securing that incoming summer internship is less in your control than your technical knowledge and your ability to articulate your views on certain subjects as it pertains to behavioral questions. I understand, but the fact is most students are not on either of those levels by January. It's like, why? It's like, I'm telling you 8 months in advance of January, it's like, do your technicals, because as I said before, the main reason why you don't get past the first round is because of your technicals. It's like, you got this far, your resume was good, your networking was good. It's like, technicals, that's like failing a math test. Okay, well, it's not that simple, but it's, what's going to be tested. You have the same resources as everyone else, and you have full visibility into a rough idea within a process, sort of like an interval of plus minus a month of when you're going to have that evaluation, that test. It's like, so there shouldn't be any reason, if you know this early on, that your technicals aren't up to scratch, that your behaviorals aren't like a 90, a 9 out of 10. And what I mean by networking is 90% complete, is that last 10% is you just sending the follow-up email to that firm being like, hey, or to your contact being like, hey, I just applied, you reiterate your interest, sort of the classic email there. But that's really it. The basis, the foundation of that network would have already been formed in the months leading up to January. Now, this really is sort of the bifurcation in sort of candidacy, right? It's like right now, 100 of you are in this room. All of you are now aware of when you need to be ready by. And it's like, it is your decision. The onus is on you to decide whether or not you want to get ready, to put the time in this summer, or to sort of, And it's okay. Like if you recognize that yourself, you acknowledge that this isn't for you, that's fine. But what I see so much and what I think is like really frustrating to the students as well is like you kind of like half-ass it, and then you're like kind of disappointed that you don't really get it, but you kind of know at the same time that you didn't really deserve it. It's like, are you all in or not? Because something like this, as competitive as investment banking, all this stuff, right? Like it requires you to be all in. But with that being said, I think let's sort of go all the way back to the beginning. Like, why are you all here? Why are 98 of you here listening to me, this random internet today, talk about how to break into roles 8 months away from now? Or actually a role that you're going to be starting in 2 years and 2 months from now, 2026. It's like, well, frankly, it pays you a lot, gives you a ton of internship or exit opportunities, and that summer internship that we're working towards, that converts into a full-time offer. So the students who landed summer 25 as their penultimate this past, back in March, like they have the next 2 years of university laid out for them, as well as the subsequent 2 years of their career laid out for them. And you want to take it a step further, it's like, well, where do you kind of go after investment banking? Well, like private equity. Is it private equity? Where do you go? Like business school. So it's like, it's security. That's what you're working towards. Security and the knowledge that, right, your career is going to be fruitful. That you'll be in abundance for at least the first 2 to 5 years of your career. But I will say imbalance is what awaits you over the next couple of years if you're determined to stay the course. Imbalance relative to what societally defined as balance, but I think it's important that you recognize that up front. And in terms of what we're working towards, what we're really solving for here, how our resume looks, how good we are at networking, and how good we are at interviews. That's really it. Now, there is a bit of a circular reference here in that your networking and interviewing ability is what will amount to a better resume, which then you have to get better at networking and interviewing to then continue to improve. But if we just look at the resume, really it comes down to like how it looks, right? What's the initial impression that someone gets of us when they see it? And I think that's comprised of 2 things: the relevance of your experiences and its volume, right? Because you probably know a student, like if for some of you first year or second year, who was that finance bro all the way from the very start, like gunning for it, right? He probably has 1 or 2 more internships than you. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. That checks out, right? He's been putting more time into it. He's been more dedicated, more committed. Probably knows a little bit more than you. So I feel like this is a very accurate representation of who we are as candidates, like the resume. And yes, a piece of paper doesn't do us justice, but I think it's important to realize what these sort of 2 components of that evaluation is as you sort of move forward in recruitment. Networking, of course, right? It's the interview before the interview. You need to do it well to get that first round interview, right? That preliminary evaluation does matter. And the unfortunate thing is, unlike a test, to improve the quality of your copy chats, it's like you just got to do more of them, because there's no, score you're getting. The person you're copy chatting doesn't tell you, hey, you could have been a bit more pleasant. You could have cracked a joke here and there. It's a binary response. It's either, and the yes or the no is like very delayed, right? For some of you probably did recruitment, like, oh, this dude, he said he's going to refer me. It's like, no, nothing materialized. It's like, well, was it him or was it, something in HR? It's like, so you're never going to get a straight answer. And then it's like, well, if you think of it like an exam, okay, the passing mark, if you just think of it like what percentage of students does a professional talk to and then give offers or give referrals to? It's like probably 1 out of 10, if not less. So the passing grade then is above 90%. So if you want to be selective about your copy chats and you want to do 1 here, 1 there, because you're taking a methodical approach, it's like you're going to learn more about copy chatting and get 5 times better if you just do 5 times more chats, which honestly isn't that much because you've probably done 2, 3, 4, or 5. So to take it, up 5 notches, like it's not even that much time. So just keep that in mind as you move forward with copy chatting. Quantity leads to quality when there's a disrupted feedback loop. when you don't get that sort of positive or negative feedback. Now, the technical side or the interview side of things, I think you guys probably all know this. It's stuff that's talked about a lot in schools, in clubs, which I'm sure many of you are a part of. But I think what many students fail to realize is, if technicals are hard because you have to balance school on top of it, it's like, well, that's a known reason because every other student has to do that too. So, like, be real with yourself. Think of like, well, if it's the sort of volume of prep that I do, and volume is a function of intensity and duration. It's like, well, if I just start earlier, then I don't need to go as hard, but I'll still end up with higher volume than other people. And remember, at the end of the day, a coffee chat as well as an interview, although it's a one-on-one thing, seems independent, like an independent evaluation. What they're doing subconsciously is like, well, they've interviewed 5 other people. How does he kind of stand compared to them? So remember to ground your preparation in those around you, because that's who you're competing against. Behaviorals, again, this one, I know it's a hard sort of topic to unravel in that what makes a good behavioral answer? What makes an even better behavioral answer, right? They're kind of unique to everyone, and we'll certainly get into that towards the end of the presentation. But I think one thing I do want to bring home is that in the interview, it is just you in the interview. No extenuating circumstances, right? You're evaluating a blank slate. You're on the same playing field as the people beside you. So that's sort of the finals, and there's no redo. So just keep that in mind as you move forward with investment banking recruitment, to understand the gravity of the interviews that you get and know that it's one shot and that's it. So if we then look at sort of how we go from where we are today to where we want to be, right? What stands between us and getting that, offer is just a lot of prep, a lot of work, right? And so that's why I always like to talk about the best piece of advice that I ever received from anyone in recruitment. And that's just simply start preparing earlier than you think and earlier than other students think. Seriously. Because many of you probably right now are like, dude, this guy's crazy. He wants us to start in April for an interview is going to happen next April. Like, what? It's like, yeah. Really, like, what it comes down to is who you're competing against. And you know that there's a guy also trying to get investment banking, studying for it today, for that interview a year out from now. It's like, how are you going to win, right? And really, it just comes down to your effort over there. For yes, okay, intelligence comes into play. Yes, the network that you have, the clubs that you are in, any nepotistic sort of situations that they may or may not be engaged in, fine. But how much utility do you get out of that? Not much, right? So it's like, what you need to do. Just do the thing. And then continually look back at what other people are doing and then readjust so that you can be confident that at the end of the day, like, yes, I put in more work. And because this is a new subject for everyone, right? Like, okay, maybe one of you, or maybe a guy who is like doing DCFs in grade 11. I don't. So I feel like it's fair to say that, this is all a fairly novel topic for everyone. So we're kind of starting out the same level. I think if you think of something like that, it kind of makes this game fun. It's like, well, how fast can I go? And yeah, as I said, your effort can be broken down into duration and intensity. It's like, which one hurts more to bring up? Intensity, right? It's like, would you rather study 6 hours over 4 days or do one 24-hour stint? Like, right? So increase duration, let intensity kind of stay normal, and you'll still achieve the same level of output. Now, I think one of the things that's hard about recruitment is to commit early on when you don't really know if this is right for you. It's hard, right? Because it's like, how can I be confident in a thing that I can't even be certain that I actually want? That's completely fair. But I think it's also fair to say that that's not going to go away. If you were to switch to something else, it's like you cannot evaluate something until after the fact, especially for a career in university, where it's like, an internship is very different from what it is full time. And to get that internship, especially in a field like finance, it takes you getting all these other internships too. So there is no like, go to the other side, jump back, check these things out. It's like the uncertainty is unavoidable. And we're all finance people. I think a concept that brings home would be like, with no risk, there's no return. They're commensurate with each other. So in parallel with that, uncertainty is commensurate with opportunity. So understand that like the uncertainty that you're feeling, the discomfort, the more that you feel, the better. Because that means it's an even bigger opportunity. And I think we talked about this earlier. It's like, that's fine. This is one of the barriers to getting in, simply because the job is hard. Right? If you can't balance school and recruitment, it's like you can't balance the job either. And you know what? It's better that you found out sooner rather than later. Actually, maybe after a couple of investment banking paychecks, it would have been good. But point stands. So to bring us back to like why this is sort of what the silver lining here is. Unlike most jobs, right? Most jobs that don't have technical interviews, that don't require you to network, a year in advance, right? And get all these other internships. When you join that career or that job, immediately the scope of what you could potentially go to next in the business world in your career narrows. And you guys kind of all know what I'm going to say next. Investment banking doesn't. It widens it. It gives you even more latitude. So I think just keep that in mind as you face that uncertainty. It's like, well, actually, like I'm like the world is going to open to me after I get in. So you know what? This pain is worth it. Now, I do have a whole presentation about calculating these scores. So if you guys do want to listen to it, just let me know. But I'll be uploading the slide deck to that sort of folder for those who stay till the end. So you'll have all the hyperlinks and everything. But yeah, let's get into summer 25, summer 26. So back here, look at the bottom. That's what we're optimizing for. It's like, okay, cool. So here we go. Jamie Dimon, remember this guy? I think we all do. This is what we want to be by the time penultimate recruiting starts. Now, if you're thinking penultimate recruiting starts in January of next year, it's like, no. It starts when you send that first email to someone you're networking with for the penultimate summer. Because that email, they open your resume. They see it. They evaluate you. They evaluate your email. Everything cascades from there. So it's not when you apply that's when you gotta be ready. It's because if you were only ready at the time of the application, it's like you're not getting a first round interview because you have to network. So you have to be ready far in advance of that point. Now I will say, just not to scare any of you, if you don't have your, let's say, like we move this forward a year from now, if you don't have your summer 25 and you're sort of looking at summer 26, right? Don't worry. I know students who have landed summer 26, or I guess in this case, summer 25 interviews without first having a summer 24. Two caveats though. One, target schools. One at Wharton, one was at Western. Second was that one of their connections was super strong. So he was already really tight with the person that referred him. So it's not impossible, but what I would recommend is if you are in that situation, as soon as you land that summer internship, the one that's the interim between the one that you're interviewing for, recruiting for, and the one that's like coming up in a month or two, immediately email every single person you networked with for that subsequent summer, that penultimate summer, to tell them that you've landed your summer internship, because that is certainly something in the back of their mind, like student AB, if one has summer, one doesn't, it's like, who are they going to take, all else equal? But to bring this back to Jamie Dimon here, relevant experience is where most people go wrong. And it's not that like people don't pay enough attention to it. It's because that the relevant experience encapsulates the other two things as well. Right? As we were saying earlier, right? You copy chat, you interview to get the offer, which improves your resume, which then you need to go through again to improve your resume. Anyways. But I will say that without the threshold of relevant experience, regardless of your networking and interviewing ability, you will not get an interview. Truly. Because it's like, this dude just doesn't have he just hasn't been doing it for that long. Like he, applied just out of the blue. This isn't something that he's thinking about. He doesn't have relevant experience. How is he going to fare on the job? So do pay a lot of attention to what you're doing over the next couple months, because unfortunately, resume experience is something that is very hard to make up for on a short time basis or within like a couple months. Yes, you can do the part-time internship, search funds, M&A advisors, and that's something that I really recommend. And we'll talk about this at the end of the presentation, but you know what I mean? It's like you got to wait a full internship term to then get the next internship and the next, and some of you are not in co-op, and it's like makes things even harder. So it's less 3 to 5 experiences and more like, what is the threshold? What is the median? And do I meet or beat that? How do you find that threshold? It's like you look at other people. Now, I know I've made a LinkedIn post about this, so I will kind of like skim through this. But basically the point is, for those in my class 22-4, what was sort of the median threshold of experience they had, right? These guys going to Barclays, Evercore, Greenhill, BC Partners. It's like 2 to 3 professional, 2 to 4 extracurricular. Now I will say the 2 to 4 extracurricular, don't get scared. Like 2 of those are probably case competitions. So it's not like, oh, you got to join all these clubs or anything, because I know it's, a lot more commitment than you'd prefer. But importantly, this is our threshold to aim for. This is sort of where they kind of all stood. And I think the interesting pattern is to note that they all started off at boutique firms. Now, I know many of you already have them, and so we're all kind of more focused on the brand name internship. And that's completely fair, because that is exactly what unlocks access to that penultimate internship, or to that, if you want to do full-time or career. But this is sort of the stuff that stands in your way. And I hope this helps sort of ground your recruitment in, okay, what are you actually doing all this for? You're not just following other people. Now you know intuitively why you're trying so hard to get these internships. So just keep those 2 thresholds in mind. Now, just to move on to extracurriculars, I will say that, yeah, so it includes anything outside the internship, competitions, blogs, investment funds, and I'll show you a couple of resume examples really quick. So, be quick. They're a great club, a lot of great placements. QPCG as well, right? A lot of great placements. So this would be sort of one of the target school clubs that would effectively reduce the amount of professional experience that you need. There's another example, case stock pitch competition. This is an example of a student. I've changed up the stuff to make it anonymous, University of Akron and all that. But yeah, just so you know, this is kind of how people usually present it on the resume. And so for a blog, so if you don't have any experience at all, let's say you're at the very, very beginning of first year, or maybe you just turned on to investment banking. It's like, well, to get something, to get at least like a professional experience, it's like you need something to prove that you're interested, because you can't just be like, I want to be a banker, and then not have anything on a resume that proves it, right? So what you can do is you can go to sites like Valley Investors Club, hedge fund presentations, get all that stuff, and like basically do your own stock pitch blog, right? You can rip off a stock pitch, and that's something I recommend. It certainly isn't beneficial in the long term, but just to get your sort of feet off the ground, it is something. Because I think the threshold to then understand those pitches out there is enough of a threshold where, it's like, okay, obviously some work had to go into understanding all this stuff. So here's an example of one that I just drafted up just for fun, but this is something that typically you would do if you had no experience. Now, they are given less weight than internships for obvious reasons, but I think to boil it down to 2, they're unstandardized, clubs that is, and extracurriculars, and they're unverifiable, in that you could say anything you want for a bullet point on your resume, and no one is going, unless it's like overtly wrong, no one is going to know whether or not you actually did that, right? Because it's like they're not background checking your club. So that's the unverifiable part. The unstandardized is just in like, well, there are certainly some clubs, maybe at your schools, that have a rigorous interview process. There are also just as many clubs, if not more, that have no interview process, or like a really easy one. So that's why they're given less weight. Now, as I was saying, target school clubs, well-reputed clubs, effectively what they do is reduce the amount of professional experience that you need, right? Because you're either placed into certain internships, you're given exclusive access to certain processes, right? or just when you're networking, right? Just like sort of like an alumni, but it's even tighter because you're part of that more exclusive group. Preferential treatment there. Now, going back to the point on unstandardized, unverifiable, because of that, by extension, what matters more than whether or not your resume entry is true is how well you can speak to that resume entry, because that is the barometer for the truth and the veracity of that entry itself, right? It's like if you stutter, if you don't sound confident, if you sound like you don't really know what you're talking about, it's like clearly you didn't do the thing. And the bar to meet in that explanation is only higher. One, the more reputed and more well reputed that club is because of that sort of like they already have an expectation of what you should be. And then also if you have less professional experience, right? It's simply just sort of, where are you going to distribute the weight? So that's extracurriculars as a whole. Now I know probably a lot of this was already stuff that you knew, but just to sort of dive into the science behind it, maybe this is helpful. Now, this covers the resume side of things in terms of like all that we need, all the different components, how to work towards what, how to understand when you need to work towards what. And this truly is what ultimately matters, this threshold. Many of you, right, are looking for this one, or at least moved on to it, right? In terms of like, do you meet it and have you overcome it, are two different things, right? But in meeting this brand name threshold, as in when you meet it, that means you are looking for that brand name internship now. So you do not have a brand name internship yet. This is sort of the landscape of internships. These are the ones that typically get. I know many of you probably have this as well. And certainly like I have another video on this, and again, I won't spend too long on that. But now that we're looking at the penultimate summer threshold, so we need that brand name internship. Okay, well, what are the universe of internships out there that we could potentially look at? Firms that would take us, right? Because I certainly suffered a lot when I was going through second year. Not because like the world was unfair or anything, I just didn't know what I was doing, right? I was networking with firms that never took second years, or not doing my diligence up front to understand what those firms were or who to talk to. I was just talking to anyone willy-nilly. And again, all these email formats, this whole list is going to be all distributed to you as long as you stay to the end. So don't worry about it. You don't need to copy this down or anything. We'll have the slide deck too. But this is sort of a good comprehensive list of firms that have taken second years that I would network with, one person at the very least, before the end of April. Okay, well, let's go back to this screen. So now that we understand the mindset to have and what we're working towards, okay, develop that tracker, great. So what do I actually do then, Matthew? And I think there are two cases as we look ahead to summer 2025. As I mentioned earlier, you're either treating summer 2025 as the penultimate cycle, or it's the stepping stone to something else, right? Meeting and gaining that brand name internship. So let's focus on the first for some of you. There are a couple options, and this is also helpful for those who are thinking ahead after summer 25, summer 26, knock on wood, should that not come to fruition, what are your options? It's like, well, couple. So I know summer 25 isn't over, but given sort of just when networking started for the big six Toronto offices, it's going to be hard to displace a student who's already been networking with the right people, who's already been following up with them and all that. So you could do UK recruitment. This is something that some Canadians do because UK recruitment for the summer happens towards like the subsequent summer. So for summer 2025, UK recruitment will probably be like June, July, August, September, and sort of a bit into October, November. But the good thing is that, well, there are probably more well-reputed investment banks in the UK than there are in Canada, right? I mean, like, you have like Goldman Sachs is huge there, right? JP Morgan, huge there, Morgan Stanley, huge there. And of course you have the EU giants as well, like a Rothschild, right? Like a BNP Paribas. So this is something that can work. And if you go and look on LinkedIn, you will see some Canadians, albeit very, very, very little, right? And I certainly had a friend who tried to do that when he missed the summer cycle. And the problem is that the Europeans do not look as fondly on networking as us North Americans do. So it's a bit of a sort of minefield as you want to kind of go through that, which is why I recommend if you were to move forward with this strategy, right, which is great because you can land a very, very, very good name brand, right? Certainly better than, or there are going to be more opportunities to land those name brands than there are in Canada. But problem is that, you know, it's like no one really likes the networking thing. So how else are you going to make a mark? How else are you going to prove to them that you are someone worth taking? And it's like, well, that's very difficult. So what's the other thing? Well, you can do off cycles. Like, well, that's kind of the obvious one. And it's like, yeah, those are okay options, but really it's like, at the end of the day, I'm going to have to do full-time recruitment, right? And the problem that I'm facing right now is I need that sort of one shiny golden internship before I can confidently say I can go get that investment banking off cycle. Because the fact is like once you get an investment banking internship, and many of you will experience this, you're like, dude, I need more. And so you'll go and recruit for off cycles now, and you're like, dude, I already have an investment banking internship. This is, you know, no risk for me. And that's who you're competing against. If you're trying to get that first shiny internship, that big sort of name brand investment banking private equity front office, it's like you're competing against people with those internships already. So you have no leverage, no credibility, and that makes full-time recruitment significantly more difficult because not only do you now have limited options, you can't predict when the cycles are going to happen, right? Why would they take you over, let's say, a full-time analyst going from TD to RBC? It's like they wouldn't. So full-time recruitment is not something I recommend, and I would honestly recommend and giving serious thought to just extending your graduation. Now, on the other side of things, summer 25 as the brand name internship, develop that networking tracker ASAP. I would ignore the big six if you know that summer 26 is something that you're working towards, that's sort of the North Star. Focus on the ones on that list. Focus on pensions. Focus on the private equity firms in Toronto, the smaller ones, the middle market, boutique investment banks, right? Long-only asset managers. Do that. And then talk to at least one person from this list of firms before the end of April. Okay? So if you have 50 firms on that tracker, you want 50 chats between now and the end of April. I know it's a lot, but hey, if you do 50 chats, it's like, dude, you've now done 10 times more chats than most people do in the first 3 years of university. You're gonna be 10 times better than them. So the other reasons why you should start early, just, you know, volume aside, right? That whole sort of duration, you know, that whole output kind of equation I presented you guys. One, it simply is just standing out. Like purely in terms of who else is communicating with these people, who else, what are the inbounds that they're getting? It's like right now in April, probably none. So you're going to stand out, higher response rate, higher chances of talking to the person, right? And as long as you're diligent and keep following up, should they not reply, you're going to continue to stand out. Now, the other reason as to why starting early is important is that the earlier that first interaction is, the longer the time between the eventual interview process, meaning the more chances you get to nurture. And I'll show you a couple of emails to use for nurturing in a second. But the more you nurture, the more rapport you build, the more likely they are to give you a referral. And even if it's not a referral to that firm, you've now forged a relationship, a professional relationship that will pay dividends down the road, right? And then lastly is if you're putting your ear to the ground as it pertains to the recruitment landscape, you're talking to people all the time and you're talking to firms that you don't even know if they're going to recruit in a month, in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. It's like, why don't you just talk to them and ask? So you're going to get security, right? Knowing that you're talking to people who are in charge of the recruitment process because they're giving you information about the recruitment process, as opposed to just not talking to anyone, waiting until an application drops, and then trying to network with them. It's like, why would you do that? Like, you no longer send out. It's like you can't nurture a relationship, and you're just getting blindsided. So you wouldn't be able to like have that runway of prep. Because if I talk to someone today, they're like, yeah, our interview's in 2 months. Like, dude, I'm gonna be prepping for those 2 months for that interview. So the last reason, and something that I think is a big point, and just a trend that I noticed as it pertains to the summer internships that occur post these sort of big like investment banking ones that happen, over a year in advance. There are two waves. The first wave happens when offers get sent out between June, July, August, and October. Right? They're probably doing, some firms will do offers in June and July. Those are the Nova Caps, those are the Turtle Creeks. Burgundy used to do it then as well, right? Altus Partners, they kind of go a little bit later, July, August. But that sort of 4 months, a lot of the more prestigious offers are sent out because not only are they getting sent to second years, getting sent to third years too, right? Because that's who you're competing against if you're trying to get these prestigious ones. But it's like to get them and to stand your ground against those 30 students, that's why you got to start early. But point is that the second wave is 3 months after that. Now, of course, there are going to be people who get, internships October, November, December. I'm saying that the vast majority of them are handed out in the second wave, the vast majority. But if you look at the balance of the summer offers that are handed out then, it's probably like 80-20, as in first wave, and then that October to December period. And that 80%, those are the really, really good brand name offers. So I hope that puts a bit of pressure on you to, pick up the slack. But I think this certainly will. It's like, well, dude, if you don't get that, if you don't meet that first wave, it's like, it's like you're networking handicapped from, should you start networking, which I do recommend. As you network for summer 26, it's like, yeah, you're handicapped. It's like you go into that coffee chat knowing that on their mind is like, dude, where is this guy's summer internship? And it's just like a matter of time. It was like a game as to like whether or not they're going to ask you about it. Hey, I've been there. So it is not fun to recruit on two concurrent timelines at the same time. It's not. It's super stressful. And you're always like watching your back. But fact of the matter is, with 88 of you here, majority of you will be in the second wave. So how do we maximize the odds that we're not, right? Well, nurturing. This is sort of the structure I'd follow when it comes to nurturing and the reasons to follow up with. And the next slide is two examples that I'll show you. But the reason why you nurture is to stay on their radar, right? This is also why you follow up, even if you're not getting responses, because like, dude, they are definitely reading your email. It's like the same as like for us guys out there, for you girls out there, right? It's like you're texting the person that you like, right? It's like, and then they're not replying, and you keep telling yourself, oh, dude, they're probably just busy. Probably just busy. It's like, yeah, we both know they're not busy. Yeah, they're reading the stuff. So they're reading it too. And as you follow up more diligently, you are making an impression. Yep. Tell you a quick story. When I was recruiting for Moelis, there was one executive director that I had heard through the grapevine through talking to analyst associates that was heading the summer intern process. And I was like, I gotta talk to him. I already talked to 7 people from the office. So I had a bit of like a fork in the road. I was like, do I even need to? It's like, yeah, I should. So email him, doesn't reply. First follow up, so that second email doesn't reply. Second follow up, third email, doesn't reply. I'm like, oh my gosh. Send one more, he replies. I'm like, okay, cool, we're setting up a time. Send him one more after that, like to be like, hey, this time works for me. It's like, I'll send over calendar, doesn't reply. I wait 2 weeks, email him one more time, doesn't reply. Email one more time, he replies, we set up the call. And I mean, you guys know the rest, but that stuff works. And something that he said to me in the super day was like, hey, the amount of times you followed up and the diligence that you showed, that stuck out to me. So trust me, people are watching when you do this stuff. Now, I'll move on to the actual emails itself. So this is something that I would draft, that I've sent to people before, not these exact companies and deals, but this person I was sending it to, she was a analyst on Evercore's healthcare investment banking team, and that's why I chose Bristol Myers Squibb Mirati, right? But essentially what I'm doing is, okay, I'm highlighting things, as I said here, from our first call, right? I remember you said this, right? Always being polite, always thanking them, always being appreciative, bringing things, sort of grounding it in recruitment, but also, being a little casual, still professional, right? Then, showed that I was interested in her, talked about something that she probably knew a lot more than me, but showed that I was keeping tabs on her and was thinking about her, not like in a weird way, but you guys know what I mean. And then again, point number 3, I mentioned something else that you told me in the chat. Now, this is only possible if you're taking notes. So every single copy chat that you do, I would try and take notes. By the way, I'm sorry guys, we are over time. I will, if you guys have to go, just DM me on LinkedIn and tell your friends if they have to leave as well. Just DM me on LinkedIn, the word SA26, I'll drop it in the chat right now. And then I will add you to the drive that we eventually use to distribute all this stuff, all the free stuff. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to like hold you guys past the 12:30 mark to like get all the free stuff. Don't worry about it. But just to bring it back to this, yeah. So basically, this will only be possible had you taken notes on that first call. So do take notes. And I know it's annoying to do. It's like you're typing away and you're thinking of the next thing to say. You're typing away. I honestly thought it was more beneficial did more good than harm, because as you go through a conversation, inevitably you get to a point where it's like, dude, I have no idea what to say next. Like literally no idea. And you're just hoping that like they don't pick up on it, and like you try to say something, and taking notes is so helpful in that regard, because if I'm tracking where they're coming from, and there's always sort of a normal trajectory, they start about their background, they talk about their university, how they got investing, blah, 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 right? And if you're writing stuff down, right, almost like an interview, and they're telling you details about themselves and you're writing it down, it's like when you're in that moment and you don't know what to say next, like you can just loop back to that. Be like, oh, you're telling me about that club. You kind of like pause for a little, buy yourself a little bit of time. And that was something that I was able to do in my school, and certainly had an experience there, blah, blah, blah. But I always found it helpful in terms of creating the next question if I was in that situation where I know what to say next. This is something else, a bit more on the casual side of things, but still stuff that I would have only been able to say had I taken notes, right? I know he said he liked steakhouses in New York, right? That his birthday was at a on a certain date. And then, yeah, like still grounding it in the recruitment process to show that I'm still interested and that's still top of mind for me. So looking ahead to this summer then, what do I think you guys should do? 1, as many coffee chats as you can. Seriously, just same as you would do for mock interviews. This is the interview for the interview. So between now and August, and certainly like even in this month, start this month, right? Try it. And as with anything, the more you do, the better you get, right? And if you treat these coffee chats like interviews, you get the reps in and do the research on the person, creating questions about them, and then you step into that chat, you face the uncertainty, right? You go through those awkward moments when you don't really know what to say, and you're like, it's physically painful for you to like create that next question and like feign interest. It's like those will add up, and those will make you a better articulator, a better conversationalist than your counterparts, 100%. So if your friends are doing 42, do 50. Comes back down to that. Read. I think something that I noticed because I was reading so much, and inadvertently, it wasn't like something that I was like doing, like I'm trying to grind reading. I've always liked reading, but I realized that because, and you guys have definitely experienced this, like these sort of finance jargon, finance vocabulary, it's very well defined. And it's very noticeable when you're reading a sell-side equity research report, because they talk about businesses like living things. So when someone says SG&A margin improved by 3%, if the current margin is 10%, like what do you guys think it means? Does that mean SG&A margins are now 7%? Does it mean they're now 13%? Does it mean they're 0.97 times 10? So 9.7 now? Or is it 1.03 times 10? Right? It's like improved, it means it would go up. But SG&A is a cost. So what it improved, like that's not a good thing. So really here what they mean is if it improved by 3%, it's 1.03. But that's not what a person is trying to say if they were to be like that. Because a cost margin improving means that it's a benefit to the business. So it's coming down, right? Because the cost margin is just the cost over revenue. And then if it's by 3%, they actually meant 3 percentage points because it's a straight deduction from 10 to 7. If you meant 3%, it would be 1.03 or 0.97 times 10%. So you could also say 300 basis points or 3 percentage points, but this little stuff that many students would trip up on, you won't if you read 4 to 10 hours weekly and you diversify the things that you read. Okay? So that's what I would do over the summer. And if you guys want like a list of books, just like message me on LinkedIn. Super down to always talk about finance books. I'm a nerd, right? Okay, technical preparation. One of the benefits of starting early is that you can understand instead of memorize, that you can really dive deep and you can be humble and be honest with yourself about what you're getting wrong, right? Part of the reason why technicals are hard is because many people study them on an abbreviated basis. As in, I have an interview in 7 days and I need to get through all the technicals. It's like, well, we're all students. We've all studied for an exam before. We've all crammed for an exam before. And we know that that stuff does not stay in our head 3 days past the interview or 3 days past the test, sorry. This summer, though, is going to be the freest time that many of you have in university, especially if you're coming out of first year. It's like, dude, what else are you going to be doing? Like, you'll probably like a part-time internship or, you know, a paid one too, but 2 options. Either grind for the next 8 months, literally, and recruiting in January of your second year. So the rest of that term, the rest of that summer, until your 3rd year summer is all planned out. You don't even need to worry about anything. Dude, if you can do school and recruitment, you're fine with just school. And then you just do that summer internship, get the full-time return, which by the way is like a 90% return rate across like most banks. So your 4th year is just like free. Versus you half-ass it this summer, you half-ass it next term, right? You're always like kind of one foot in, 1 foot out. And then you don't get the thing that you want. So you continually look for an upgrade and you continually have to recruit and pay attention to the landscape and, you know, listen to guys like me talk about recruitment, right? And it's like you never actually get the thing that you always wanted because you never fully committed. I don't know about you, but I would rather do option A. So in terms of penultimate preparation, and we're going to bring it back to here, and I'll speed it up for you guys. I'll just speed through the rest of the slides in the next 3 to 5 minutes, and then you guys can drop any questions you have in the chat. I know there are some pre-existing ones, and so I can run through them. But if you guys have any new ones, just feel free to drop them down. But yeah, I don't want to keep you guys any longer. I do appreciate all of you for staying. So let's look back at the penultimate preparation here. Let me just set a timer for 5 minutes. Okay. Right, so that's the resume, right? Essentially, you want to continue doing that prep or doing that networking throughout the summer. There will be some second year or December 25 internships like the boutique investment banks, like the GP private equity firms that will ask technicals in the interview processes. Not as difficult as they would be for investment banking or like the penultimate ones, but it is going to, I think, use that as another motivator to start studying the technical guides. And if you want a rule of thumb, it's 1 week, 1 guide. So you should be able to get through accounting in terms of read it, understand it. Maybe you don't get all the questions correct in 1 week. Now, on the networking side of things, because this slide will be distributed to all of you, I tried to make this as detailed as possible. So I'll give you the Spark Notes. For penultimate summer networking, right, you want to first develop that networking tracker like you would for summer 25. Dang. All the way, junior to managing director. In fact, I would try to do the past interns as well. Give you that inside information about who to talk to, analysts, blah, 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 and you work your way up. So you cannot send more than 5 emails to employees at the same seniority level, or sorry, 3 at the same seniority level in a week. Why? Because they talk to each other. A lot of students, I've experienced this too, will email like 10 people, analysts, same office. It's like, dude, they talk, and I've gotten responses. My students have gotten responses where it's like, hey, like, you can't really do that. Like, it's kind of rude. People don't like that. It's like, okay, so spread them out. Again, reason to start early, right? Because you can address everyone. And then also increases the amount of like people that you eventually talk to at the bank, just because of the amount of people reach to you and the response rate. It's just sort of like higher denominator in that way. But beyond that, I would try and before every chat, try and study them, invite commonalities. Hey, sometimes if you gotta fabricate the commonality, do it, man. Right? If you see scuba diving on their LinkedIn profile and you know that saying scuba diving is gonna get you like build more rapport because you don't have anything and you're from different schools and like different ethnicities, it's like maybe do a bit of research on scuba diving and say it's your thing. He's not gonna know the difference, right? Again, take notes, not just to like nurture and follow up with, but also so that you can gain ammunition for behavioral questions. These guys in investment bankers, right? Not only did they say the right behavioral answers at the time when they were recruiting, but now they have the benefit of being on the other side and so can enhance those answers with maturity, with hindsight, with precision, with better articulation. So what you're getting from them, those are the nuggets that you should really pick up on. And you'll notice like common threads across investment bankers' answers when it comes to certain behavioral questions, how they introduce themselves. Pick up on that stuff. Again, always send a thank you email, no matter what. And I sort of go from here. The referral really just comes down to doing more than other students, like trying harder, spending more time researching them on the call itself, suffering through more of that physical tension, right? Taking better notes, truly understanding. Now, I will say that it's impossible to do this on a one coffee chat basis. Like this is something they're going to get better over time. So I'd say a bigger determinant of getting the referral is simply the amount of coffee chats you've done before that coffee chat. Now, yeah, so you want 3 to 5 content at every firm. This is all pretty self-explanatory. I know I have a question from you, James, and I'll run into that in a sec because coffee chatting is going to be right after this. This is just sort of like try to work your way up the hierarchy. Try not to talk to the MDs and VPs before you're talking to the junior ones. It's just sort of simple, like you get more information. These chats tend to be drier and all that stuff. But in terms of structure of coffee chat and like the biggest mistakes that I've seen, I think the best frame to use is colleague student. What would the colleague do? And how do I sound like a colleague, right? How do I make myself someone that they can see themselves working with? Because that really is all it comes down to. Even the technical interview, it's like, could I work with this guy? Like, do I have to go to his desk every single, 30 minutes and explain to him how to calculate WACC? No, you don't want to do that, right? So some of the biggest things that immediately identify you as a student, so like basically will prevent you from getting the referral is, I think you guys have heard enough about email over LinkedIn, is one, not having a scripted introduction. Script it. It's so important. It really does make a big difference when it comes to the impression you create, right? And if you think about it, everyone that you're going to encounter in recruitment is a stranger. So they're the ones in positions of power. 2 would just be how you respond. Now, maybe some of you watched the YouTube video, and I've certainly said this before. It's like, when they like say something to you, you kind of juggle a ball, repeat back to them in own words, create your own personal view, draw a link, blah, blah, blah. I think a better way of thinking about it, right, is, well, certainly you still want to make them feel heard. You still want to like add in your own value and then transition nicely to the next question. But one thing that I've noticed works really well is sort of just telling them what answer you expect first. So instead of like, what was the biggest challenge that you faced when you went full-time at IB? Like, I saw on your LinkedIn profile, you're in a couple clubs before, some of them not even finance related. And so I was wondering that how you kind of bridge that gap. I'd imagine that it wasn't necessarily easy, but given your sort of stellar track record throughout your career so far, I feel like you've gotten very used to sort of being, adapting these new situations. I'm wondering, how did you do that, and what were you feeling at the time? Same question, but just completely different impression that you create. You're more thoughtful, more critical, like sort of critical thinking. You're tailoring the question. You're making the extra effort, what a lot of students don't do. So that's something. Create a statement. You can craft a story, right? So yeah. Now, a lack of structure. So I think just high level, really quick, just coffee chats generally. First 3 to 4 minutes is always just sort of like intros, blah, blah, exchange them, cool. You tell them why you're talking to them. They tell you who they are. Kind of like it's just a sort of like a AI bot saying their LinkedIn profile, essentially. It's not materially different across person to person. And then, right, it's like, well, what are you going to get to? You're trying to get to that sort of point at the end of the conversation where, you've shined their shoes enough and you can confidently switch the recruitment side of things. Now, there isn't a hard like minute that you have to do this at, you can't do this at. If the chat's dying, just do it at the 20-minute mark or 15-minute mark. But during those times, I would always try and just follow the chronology of their introductions. How do they introduce themselves? Usually school, usually then like the end of school and recruiting for investment banking, usually then it's like investment banking itself. And then it's kind of like, hey, what have they done since then? So ask questions, right, along that timeline as well. And at each point while you're asking those questions, right, proffer those answers, craft that story, right? Go beyond just saying, oh, cool. And so how is this? So a lot of students do. Trust me, more than you think. Okay, so this stuff will all be given out to you guys, so I won't spend too much time on this. If you want to go to the US from Canada, like you're going to be sending a hell lot of emails. Hell a lot. So just get ready for that, especially if you're from a non-target and are not in one of those like target clubs. So interview prep of just make sure. I think one of the important things I'd mention is just like for behaviorals, do try and really sit down with yourself and reflect. Because the sooner you can identify the real reasons that you're pursuing investment banking, the real things that you are confident set you apart, the real unique aspects of your background, the sooner your behavioral answers will click. The reason why behavioral answers don't click a lot of the time, why they're not 10 out of 10, is because they're not your answers, right? Either you haven't taken the time to reflect, and therefore they don't truly represent what you think and who you are, or you took it from a friend. And that's okay. I did that too. But at some point, if you want to deliver a stellar answer, you have to sit down with yourself and be honest with yourself about your intentions as it pertains to recruitment and why you're doing things. So this would be a good framework to follow. Now, I would also, try and do as many mock interviews, as much feedback as you can, right? And certainly practice verbalizing your answers as you think about them. But I would always think about behaviorals as being comprised of two things, right? And you guys can read these to-dos in your own time, but there's the content of your answer and there's delivery. Both are equally impactful. The way that you deliver it, right, is confidence. It's, again, like 70% of communication is non-verbal. So the veracity of that answer, how compelling it is, how genuine it seems, how authentic you come off, how confident you come off, how pleasant you are, right? How much they want to work with you. A lot of it comes down to your delivery. The content is what needs to be aligned with your background. It needs to show that you're reflective and you're thoughtful and you're really thinking about why you want to do this thing because of past experiences. If you think about it, whenever you say you want to do something, like confidence, you're confident you want to do something. That's how you say with conviction, right? That is only possible when you know that it's happened before, when in some form or another, it's happened in your past, and therefore, because history repeats itself, it's like, yeah, it'll probably happen again. Example, right? Investment banking, the fast-paced environment, right? Many of you have probably talked about that. It's like, well, one of the things that you should always go with is like, okay, well, fast-paced environment. So why do you care about fast-paced environment? Tell me the actual benefit. Like, tell me why you actually care. Don't just say the reason, which is what a lot of students do. Oh, it's a fast-paced environment. I thrive in that. And, I think being in that will like really develop me throughout my career. It's like, okay, well, first, like, I didn't even see the link between the fast-paced and the developed. So how did you arrive at that link? Tell me about the past experience. It's like the long-term lens is good in terms of long-term benefit, but like that's when it comes down to content. Like you're not articulating that. What is that benefit? Why does the fast-paced environment help? So I would really, really think through your behavioral answer to see is like, is this genuine? And yeah, dude, if you have to sit down and spend like an hour, 2 hours perfecting one question, this is an answer you're going to use over and over and over and over again. So it is worth that time. Now, I would try and think about every single question through the lens of like why you're the best candidate. So always think about highlighting that unique aspect about yourself, right? Or about your past experiences, or how and because it kind of does all come down to how your past experiences make you unique. Whether that's childhood, whether that's personal, family, or work, professional, extracurricular, there's something about your background that no one else can replicate, and that's what you should hone in on. And that's what requires a lot of reflection. Because it's like what truly is unique, and it's usually not a superficial thing. It's something a bit deeper. So it does take some time to uncover, but the important thing is that you don't leave any stones unturned. Now, this is sort of a good checklist to have as you move forward with interviewing and just how to think about this stuff. But I'll skip over that for now. And yeah, this I wrote in very great detail so that you guys could have it in your own time. But to move on to technicals, and actually, okay, so I'm gonna host another technicals workshop in the summer. So you guys will get this slide deck as well. And I'll definitely do another announcement. It'll probably be in May. But just because I know I've taken up a lot of your time and I really do appreciate it. So I will, if you guys want to drop any questions in the chat, I'll be here for the next 5. But please, please, please send me a message on LinkedIn, just SA26, and I will add every single one of you to a Google Drive folder with all the sort of attachments that we were talking about today at the very start. So let me just go all the way to the very beginning. And I'll also put in the chat the link to join the coaching program. So right now we're running 20% off, right? Essentially giving you the summer free, because we usually do a year-long program, right? So that's actually even more, giving you the 4 months free. So that's gonna be like 33%. So if you guys want to join or at least see what's up, right? Maybe you're interested, maybe you don't really know if that's for you, but you are committed. First, you got to be committed to investment banking. And if you are, then yeah, no, let's talk. And I'll drop the link in the chat really quick. But otherwise, I will 100% be adding you guys over the weekend. So if you do not see that by Monday, please, 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 like spam me on LinkedIn, and I will definitely address it. But yeah, thank all of you for coming. Now, how important is the font style for suppression resume? I would kind of just like not try and go outside the norm too much. So honestly, Pranav, with finance being as traditional as it is, it's not worth it to like try and be edgy. So I would either use Times New Roman, Arial, or Calibri. Seriously, actually not Calibri, Arial or Times New Roman. Aptos Narrow from Microsoft. I guys, you guys know it's a new default font. It's actually pretty nice. So yeah, Aditi, could you like send me an email? It's just I don't have the Google Drive link with me right now. How do you find a professional email, Vic? So there are a couple ways. Typically, you got to find the email format of the firm, and then you put 2 and 2 together because it's simply a function. Here, I'll show you guys really quick. Just stop sharing the screen. Because a lot of the time, these email format or these email addresses, professional ones that is simply just like, it's a suffix that you need, and then the prefix is just a permutation of something. Sorry. So here, I'll show you. And this will be the one that I give you guys in that drive folder. Is there any recruiting timeline? By the way, Vic, do you see what I mean? It's just first, last. You put 2 and 2 together. So you can find these online. Usually it's just the suffix at the end, the @CIBC. That's sort of unique. Is there any difference in recruiting for S&T, AM, or IB? Yes, IB is always first. AM is a pretty broad umbrella term, so it's hard to say. Like, AM technically covers private equity, right? And if it was private equity and we included mega fund private equity, then mega fund private equity was just in line with like IB. But I think you're more so thinking about like boutique long only asset managers. Those would be last. So IB, S&T, and then AM. Shodan, how to leverage 25 recruiting for 2026. What do you mean by leverage your 2025 internship? It's on your resume. So yeah. Oh, Sadat, could you do a super short rundown for summer 24, please? Yeah, sure. I mean, like, it's Sadat, actually, I have a whole presentation on that. So I'm so sorry we ran out of time today, but could you like send me a LinkedIn message? Just be like SA24, and I will personally send over a Excel tracker for you with a list of firms, email templates to use, as well as the presentation deck. So that you basically get everything you need for summer 24. And don't worry, Sadat, you still have time. Even if you start emailing next week, you're okay. plenty of my students will get these internships in like 2 weeks from like any point in time. So you're not too late at all. Don't worry about it. Wondering if you had any in-person follow-ups regarding networking. So you want to if you can travel to Toronto and try to recruit. No, it's just that you got to set up ahead of time, Adam. So like, and typically the in-person stuff is better for like second time, like second chat, because you already had the first initial one, and then it's less awkward. So I would try and do it, yeah, in advance. Set that stuff up in advance. Tell them you're coming to Toronto. Tell them multiple dates that you'll be in Toronto, so you give them a bit of a menu of things to choose from. And yeah, it certainly it wouldn't be too inconvenient in that case. Non target, recommend doing right now last summer. Do you mean for your junior year? Yashna, is your junior year, then I would really try and just like get as much relevant experience right now as possible, typically done through boutique firms, right? As we were discussing, that first boutique name threshold. Should I approach it as talking to a past intern? No, I wouldn't, Daniel, don't approach it like you're talking to a past intern, because past intern is still like someone at your level. An analyst is still someone that has power over you, right? And so you should reflect that in the way you talk to them. Come up with more technical questions about the company. It's less like about the company. Dude, I would ask more about him and how his experience has been in the company. Because if you think about it, a coffee chat is only valuable because they give you a unique perspective. And if it's a unique perspective they're giving, well, like the only thing that they can speak uniquely about is themselves. So just use that lens as you think about coffee chats. Benjamin, it is not. Ahmed, big for audit. It's like it's like worse than it's probably like, if you look at that hierarchy, finance and accounting was at the bottom, audit is right there. John Harlow, hedge funds, I find them more valuable than IB and PEs. There are a couple in the US that have regular recruitment cycles, but there are far and few between. So I would get really clear on which exactly. Millennium is one, Citadel is one, Point72 is one, Sculptor takes people sometimes, Silver Point sometimes. Those are all the ones I know off the top of my head. Some of the Canadian pensions have hedge groups. But guys, I'm so sorry. I do have to go. But I really appreciate all your interest. So please send me SA26 on LinkedIn, and I will get to it before the end of the weekend. You guys will have access to the drive, and I'll make a post on LinkedIn announcing it. And anyone who like still hasn't gotten access, just message me here. And yeah, cool. Okay, guys, have a good rest of your weekend.